The great French writer Leon Bloy once wrote that the only real sadness, the only real failure, the greatest tragedy in life is not to become a saint. Now, if you're like most people, you're probably thinking that he's being a bit hyperbolic. After all, most people are not saints, and most people seem to be doing just fine, right? Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a youth mentor and teacher, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to the Jesus-Centered Life Conference. I feel grateful for this opportunity to speak to you about two things that are dear to my heart: positive psychology and the call to sanctity in the 21st century. So my background in positive psychology is pretty straightforward. 2 years ago, I completed a master's degree in applied positive psychology. And ever since then, I've been using what I learned in my professional work. So I work with young people, and I try as much as possible to identify their strengths, help them to be aware of these strengths, and use them so that they can become the best possible versions of themselves. And in this talk, I really want to be able to draw from insights from positive psychology, which is this new science of human strengths and flourishing, to show you how we can confidently and joyfully take on the mission of becoming saints in the 21st century. Because truthfully, the call to holiness is a call to authentic happiness and complete fulfillment, not just in the next life, but in this one. So it's not a call that should frighten us or make us cynical, thinking that it's completely unattainable, unrealistic, irrelevant to our lives today, because it is the exact opposite of that. To be a saint is to be fully alive, and I am so excited to be able to share with you how that can be. So I'll also be drawing from the best source of wisdom that we have today, which is the sacred scriptures. I'll be also quoting and sharing with you some insights from the works of Pope Francis, especially his encyclical Gaudete et Exsultate, to really round out this discussion on the call to holiness. So I want to start with just that word holy or holiness. Actually, holy comes from an Old English word holig, which means health, happiness, and wholeness. So really, when we speak about holiness, we're not just talking about this kind of abstract divine ideal. When we talk about holiness, we're really going at the very human longing and this deep desire that we all have for a life of completeness and just meaning and fulfillment. And so I know as Christians, we believe that we can't achieve this completeness or fulfillment or holiness in any definitive way here on earth, because of course the perfect happiness is the happiness that we will experience in heaven when we are in union with God. But that shouldn't stop us also from pursuing a meaningful life here on earth. And precisely that idea of trying to live a meaningful and flourishing life is what drives the movement of positive psychology. So a bit of a background on positive psychology. It actually is a new science. It started in 1998 when the American psychologist Dr. Martin Seligman became the president of the American Psychological Association, and in his inaugural address, he really called for this positive psychology, which is in contrast to traditional psychology, because up until that point, psychology was just focused on curing, identifying, diagnosing mental illnesses, which is extremely important. It's the issue of mental illness is a very serious issue, and of course we need a lot of work, and we need a lot of resources going into that question of, how can we help people who are suffering mentally. But that kind of model of psychology is the result of a post-World War II era, where, of course, you had a lot of people experiencing the great horrors of war, coming home. We had soldiers coming home with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety. And so psychologists had to find a way to cure and treat people suffering from these illnesses. But that is really a very incomplete view of psychology, because, of course, there's more to humanity than just the things that can go wrong. There's actually a whole other area of human psychology which should be about asking what can go right with human beings. And Martin Seligman really advocated for this. And I'd like to just quote something that he wrote, which puts this in a very clear way. So he said that psychology shouldn't be just a study of weakness and damage. It's also the study of strength and virtue. Treatment is not just fixing what is broken, it's nurturing what is best within ourselves. Now, this refreshingly positive understanding of human behavior is something that we find also in the Gospels. In fact, it's something that Jesus, in his life here on earth, actively sought to promote. And I'm going to share with you one of my favorite moments in the life of Jesus. This is his famous Sermon on the Mount. And so at this point in his life, he has already kind of built up this reputation of being a miracle worker, curing people with different illnesses and diseases. And so he's just gathered so many people, a huge following just of all these really individuals who were wanting to be cured of their misery, and they wanted to be alleviated from their suffering. And so in this episode in the Gospel of Matthew, we find Jesus climbing up a hill, looking down at the people who were following him, gathered at the bottom of the hill. And he knows that they're there because they're miserable, and they're there because they want their suffering to cease. And Jesus acknowledges this. He knows that there's nothing that they seek more than an end to their suffering. But he also understands very well that deeper than that longing for their suffering to end is this great desire, this thing that we have in our heart of hearts that looks for something beyond that. And so by standing up on the hill and giving his sermon, he goes beyond his usual business of alleviating misery and delivers this amazing speech, which highlights what's praiseworthy. And of course, that speech is what we now know as the Beatitudes. I'd love to be able to quote the whole passage, but in the interest of time, I will have to just assume that you will be able to read those on your own, the Beatitudes. But so I'll continue with the account. So after he delivers the Beatitudes, there's 8 of them, he just looks at the crowd and he sees that they're amazed. Because after listening to this spontaneous litany of praise, the crowds are just astonished. They've never seen anyone like Jesus. They've never heard anyone speak like he does, because they're used to the scribes and the Pharisees who speak in a language of admonition, of prohibition. But here is Jesus speaking in a language of affirmation and encouragement. He does not belittle or blame, he blesses. He speaks to what is good. He seeks out what's right and he elevates it. He doesn't call people out, he calls them forward. So in a series of studies that involved asking hundreds of people about their good and bad qualities, research found that people were easily able to describe their flaws and their weaknesses, but they really struggled to find the words to describe their positive attributes, the things that were praiseworthy and admirable about themselves. And this is the negativity bias, which is what positive psychology seeks to counteract. And the way it tries to do so is by identifying and building on the human strengths, the inner strengths that we all have. So for 3 whole years, Dr. Martin Seligman, who is the founder of positive psychology, and his colleague, Dr. Christopher Peterson, along with 50 other researchers, studied different cultures and civilizations across time and from all over the world. They looked at the different religions and philosophies, the different sacred texts and folk stories, to look for the core human characteristics that human beings universally acknowledged and valued. Now, the result of this study was the Values in Action Classification of Strengths, a taxonomy that puts together all of the best things that human beings are capable of and value in others. And these were the 6 core virtues of courage, wisdom, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. So this via character strengths survey or classification of strengths acts as sort of an antithesis of the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM, which is what psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose people with mental illnesses. Now, again, the DSM is a very important document. It's very useful, but it only tells us one aspect of our psychology, the negative aspect, the things that can go wrong. And what the VIA classification of strengths does is it gives us a shared vocabulary of the best things that human beings are capable of. And these are our strengths of character, these core virtues. So the 6 core virtues are what's called the values in action. So VIA stands for values in action, right? And so those virtues, under those 6 core virtues are the character strengths, the 24 character strengths, and all of us, each one of us, has all 24 of these character strengths. And they fall under the 6 umbrella virtues, and what they do is that they operationalize the 6 core virtues. So a great way of thinking about these character strengths is that they make these kind of sort of abstract ideals of wisdom and justice and temperance more real and really, in a way, more human. So, for instance, my top 3 character strengths are love for learning, appreciation of beauty and excellence, and spirituality. Now, appreciation of beauty and excellence fall under the core virtue of transcendence. Spirituality as well. So every time I practice my spirituality, when I go to Mass or I pray, I manifest or embody that virtue of transcendence. The same thing with appreciating beauty and excellence. Anytime I read a book and I find the writing beautiful, I'm experiencing the virtue of transcendence. So really, that's what the character strengths are. Again, I don't have the time to go through all 24 of them, but if you're curious, you can just go to viacharacter.org to see what those 24 strengths are. And actually, if you have 15 to 20 minutes, you can take a survey, and the website will give you a list of your top character strengths ranked according to which comes more naturally to you. So I highly encourage you to do that so that you know what your character strengths are. You know the things that are best in you are. So developing character strengths and virtues is not only beneficial in the pursuit of moral excellence, they're also good because they enhance our well-being and happiness. So particular character strengths like love, hope, gratitude have been positively associated or linked to happiness. Research has also shown that using character strengths can help individuals cope with the challenges of life, and they cultivate positive or better relationships. Also, if you're a parent, apparently the character strength of self-regulation is associated with higher life satisfaction for your children. So for all the parents watching, I would just like to encourage you and to tell you that you're doing a great job, even though sometimes it's exhausting. So really, when we talk about holiness, when we talk about cultivating virtues, we are talking about something that appeals to the very best of ourselves. And it's something that we should really kind of accept and look forward to doing with joy. Pope Francis, in one of his encyclicals, writes that we shouldn't be afraid of holiness because it takes away none of our energy, vitality, or joy. So in the Gospels, Jesus also tells us something similar. To his apostles, he says, I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. In other words, he's reminding us that a life lived to its fullest is one that aspires to meaning and virtue. This is not just an inspiring message. It's also like what I just showed you, backed up by empirical evidence, by this exciting new science of positive psychology. A meaningful life, a happy, a truly joyful life is a life that cultivates the best in human beings, which is basically our character strengths and virtues. So to close, I would just like to reiterate again that when we talk about holiness, when we talk about responding to the call to be saints, it's not just avoiding sin. It's also about cultivating virtue. Holiness reminds us that there is more to life than just finding out what's wrong and trying to correct that. It invites us to be the best possible versions of ourselves by first knowing the best in ourselves and making sure that those are the things that we really develop and build on. Now, there is, of course, a spiritual dimension to this call, which has to do with grace. The church teaches that we can't really achieve holiness all on our own. So it's good that we cultivate virtue, but we need the grace of God to perfect these virtues. And so we need to rely on His grace. We need to still receive the sacraments. We need to still be in constant prayer and communication with our Lord. So just to close, I hope that what you heard in this talk has inspired you to get started on your journey to sainthood. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to visit viacharacter.org. That's where you will find the Via Character Strengths Survey that will tell you what your top character strengths are. So I would like to end with a quote again by Pope Francis. He says that becoming a saint means becoming more fully yourself, becoming what the Lord wished to dream and create, and not a photocopy. If you simply copy someone else, you will deprive this earth and heaven too of something that no one else can offer. And so with that, I'd like to encourage you to not be afraid of holiness, to go for the best possible life, which is a life of meaning, a life of virtue, and a life of complete happiness. Thank you very much, and I'll see you all hopefully soon.